Welcome all. Devin took his graduate degrees in the English department here, and he was a very active presence in the late 90s. It was always fun to talk with him about poetry, talking about contemporary American poetry, about which he knew a lot, wound up writing about that poetry, but he also knew a lot about English and Irish poetry, much more than I ever have, and so I always stood to gain from those conversations, and I recollect them fondly. He was poetry editor of the Chicago Review from 1995 until 2000. You can see that he liked that job. When he left Hyde Park to take an assistant professorship at St. Louis University, where he's now an associate professor, his absence was felt in the poetry community here at the university, I can say. Since then, Devin has truly many accomplishments to his credit, as you will see. He published his first book of poems, Telepathy, in 2001, and then one could see, or still better, one could hear, how determined he is to make poems that truly register in sound. Devin's writing is austere in terms of theme and reference, but altogether palpable and full of play and intensity at the level of prosody and of word choice. He's a surprising poet there. The poems in his wonderful second book of poems, Versions, which came out in 2004. Whoop, wrong book, sorry. Versions, this is such a handsome cover too. 2004, these poems continue to work through traditional English prosody in large part, and mostly in a cool and playful manner. But there's a compelling undercurrent, too, of feelings that are only indirectly approached. I would read his poem Ghost now, at this point in my introduction. This is my favorite poem of Devin's, if Devin weren't here to read it himself, as I hope he does. Between these two books of poems, he managed as well to publish a critical book, Precipitations, Contemporary American Poetry as a Cult Practice, in 2002. And he and Michael O'Leary, I don't know if Michael's here. No. He and Michael O'Leary have founded a wonderful new press, Flood Editions, which is here in Chicago. This is a press that publishes new books of poetry and short fiction, too. This press is off to a wonderful start, as some of you know, and those of you who don't know Flood Editions can go to the Seminary Co-op and look at books by Tom Pickard, Fannie Howe, Robert Adamson, to get a sense of what Devin is doing as an editor. So Devin is well along in making a very distinctive and ambitious career for himself as a man of letters. He's a critic, he's an independent publisher, and today he's here as a poet. Please join me in welcoming Devin Johnston.
Thanks, Bob. I'm going to start and read for about half the time poems from Versions, which were written here in Chicago, and mostly, I think, all but a few. And returning to them recently, I was kind of seeing them anew and sort of the ghosting of what's old and what's new in the poems. And that's one possibility in the epigraph from Violette Leduc, her memoir, La Bâtarde. We go on loving those we have loved in other forms, or else we begin to cherish in other forms those we should have cherished in the past. Nothing changes. Everything is transformed. Ghost. When talking to myself, I take a tone I've learned from you, not of boyish charm, but probing and severe. To say, some things are clear, and some withdrawn from sight. A cyclist is only such while seated on a bike, a sleeper while asleep. These forms are only forms fulfilled, as you are now no more than this, a tone. This next poem, I refer to Graham, which was my great-grandmother named Agnes, which obviously means lamb. She was anything but that, sort of a terrifying person. In an orchard, Shades of Graham, somatic code. I sense some strain of you in what I am or did, in turning down a cell path choked with vines from a relict rose or metal vetch, impediments of what I own to what I owe, the shadow of a seed unfurled. I was a wolf and not a lamb, as your thoughts turned to mine. Ensconced in pulp, I found you hard, but not so difficult to understand. Some of these first poems in the title refers to this, sort of circle around the ancient Greek and Roman rites of aversion. They had not only ceremonies to summon spirits, but also to placate ghosts and spirits and keep them away, particularly those of relatives or ancestors. More immediately, this poem concerns a friend from Flint who grew up in Flint, Michigan, who was pursued by a bully as a kid, and this pursuer always wore a red cap and was known as Red Cap, and so he's easily spotted. Aversion. The characters who populate your waking life tend to possess some glaring flaw, specific rage or weakness, which, demonstrative, becomes their essence, so refined with each retelling of their lives that little shames and baby talk and hallowed scars from distant wars have burned away. As Redcap proves, your torturer in Flint that June, who never doffed his epithet and never caught you by surprise, so uppercase was his approach. A redcap floating in the crowd, a redcap at the barber shop, arcade, or park. Your redcap's now an ovid bird, some flicker, finch, or cardinal, transfixed in endless chase. We may need to make a sacrifice to keep such knowledge from ourselves. My friend, perform aversions, smear the doors with pitch, the floors with blood, and chew on spine-tipped buckthorn strips to fend them off, those spirits who would collar us, stare in our eyes, and then, as Slinger says, describe. That ending is a recipe for rites of aversion, so you can try it at home. Dead. Some find it dangerous to analyze the dead. They shut a collie in the coat, then find him gone. Or else the blackest plum proves bitter on the tongue. An unequated remnant lodges in the head. When venturing abroad, they tilt each name and date against their silhouettes, and looking up, take aim. The landscape loses depth, collapsing near and far as plumbing groans when taps are turned, emitting air. The bed is hard, the room is cold, and some have found the dead, though well attuned, are slow to understand. February is the month in which I think both the Greeks and the Romans performed rites of aversion. February. Pitch black doors detain a darker fact. We know of no wide sky to award, but ward off those we've known too well. Avert your eyes. Someone takes a metal crate of apples from the trunk, but not for us. Each night we undertake a voyage of avoidance. This is a loose translation from Horace, basically replacing Horace's Roman geography with the geography of Chicago. Early spring. The hardest of winters will crack at the tap of spring and milder systems. Performance yachts are winched from dry dock storage. Chafed by confinement, the amateur botanist hates his apartment, and city parks no longer shine with frost. Venus ascends through the elms as the moon swings closer. and teens entwine their fingers as they ramble, sandals abandoned. A night shift employee waves her scanner, restocking surge suppressors of summer lightning. Now's the time to relax, with a puff of grass to tangle thoughts with flowers, which float above the thawing earth. On the shadowy paths of the graveyard, it's time to burn some useless sacrifice to wildness. Colorless death will descend on Division's tattered kiosk or board of trade, regardless. You've been lucky, David. Hope for the future's restricted. The longest of lives is short. Night and half-remembered forms are closing in, a thin and emotionless heaven. Within its walls, no joke of yours will ripple through the darkness, lending a wonderful curl to McPherson's lip, for whom the boys now burn, and girls will soon catch fire. This next one is a translation from Catullus, sort of the same thing. In this poem, Catullus is talking about the furthest reaches of the known world, which for him are basically the furthest reaches of the Roman Empire. So I had to find, to get that across, I had to find other limits. Distant warnings. Trembling veil, my limit. Whether I plumb the Marianas Trench as waves of doubt thunder miles above, or brush a stand of birch with sheaths of rain, or net a white noddy adrift on beds of kelp. Whether and whither the mind wanders in dreamy disquietude, asleep of a prairie noon as buckboards creak, prepared to risk the latitudes of chance and trance, to the querent convey a warning word. Awake to the world, the skin is supple and resilient, susceptible to stroke or sudden heat. But with a glance, this veil will fall as when a flower falls, glanced by the iron edge of a passing plow. I don't think of these poems as so geographically located, but now that I don't live in Chicago, they feel that way to me. This one mentions the river, which is the Chicago River. It's at that point near Ashland where you can smell a tannery, and I lost my wallet there once. Lost wallet. Obstinate substance survives the river, survives the astringent tannery, kitsch, dead smelt, and silverfish. Surviving pleasure, its suck leaves us thinner, and each bank counseled as to its flow, concretized to move more swiftly, elsewhere distressed to slow. Posts of pale duck egg drift past as money skurs the tacky tar where once unfurled a bourbon flag. We have brought everything to market. Some of these poems are more or less explicitly persona poems. They all sort of feel like persona poems to me, just in that you're always, even if it's your life, you're having to imagine it in language or in the poem anyway, but some more so. This one, an old friend of mine works in Taiwan in the windshield repair business. And first he worked for a company named Mr. Glass, and then another one named Dry Star. Dry Star. When Mr. Glass is set to work, you'd need a wax pencil to circle where the cracks had been. But I could tell of times the vacuum failed, or bullseye from a home run hit survived meticulous repair. Taipei Expo, early June, 11 years ago. The fluorescent lamp that cured our diamond resin died and left us in a sweat. Since sunlight is another agent, Iraqi and I dragged our demonstration pane beside the rooftop pool. Buffeting winds from the pescadores buckled plexiglass, and what late light there was lit up capillaries, chips, and a cloud of fingerprints. That's when I switched to Dry Star, and never once looked back. Los Angeles. The Colorado River flows, sand silt, through fluted taps in Universal City. Saturn nears. Beneath millennia and shale, a riot growth of giant fern and brontosauri decompose, but through the auspices of wildcats blaze in incandescent beads along a sliding mirror. Long extinct, their ghosts reticulate the hills and hulks of studios, an Oz of local urgencies. Beneath the moon, emotions are but vectors dragging distant objects near. As Daikon sputters on the open flame, the owner of Pagoda Inn cradles the phone against his shoulder. Neither party speaks, yet leagues of fiber optic lines exchange their silences. Black balloons. At 7, thought balloons ascend through trees, each endless surface lit by Beetlejuice. Working nights, I wake to the roll and clap of skateboards, wave on wave of debris in a dry bed. With nothing much in mind, I wash my face and read a letter from Brazil. Outside, the dogman holds a blade of grass between his thumbs. Its whistle penetrates both brick and bone. An awning snaps. Exhaust pursues a bus emblazoned with cartoons of singing cats down crowded streets. And through the minimum of space, from windowsill to sash, a thought escapes. This poem is, I think, all too autobiographical as a compulsive person. Character, not just as strength of character, but character as in, like, he's a character. Character. The insistence on order among toys reflected a larger disorder. Sunlight on the rifle's sight entailed a world outside and preceded my character, which I thought more likely stalking behind my shoulder, making a nuisance of itself out of what I knew without my knowledge. On a slip-up among strangers, I took leave of my senses and called a sudden halt, on the chance it might lurch past and into view. This poem refers to bitter honey, which I gather the taste of honey is determined by what pollen makes the honey. Clover is sweet honey, and I think privet is one sort of bitter honey. But other environmental factors as well come into it. Pollution, all sorts of whatever's in the air comes into the honey. Influence. Smoke gets into everything. Bitter honey, autumn's distillation, bears an aftertaste of cats and muscatel. When privet dominates, hives disperse in sparks through private darkness, filling cells with evidence of elsewhere. Spores of cockle rush and dock, contraband, perfume, and punk. Even you, asleep and breathing deeply, open from the core to all that you are not. I'm going to switch to more recent poems. This is Sleeping In. Wake and sleep, sleep and wake. Sheet smell of sour milk, tangled up with pine perfume. Outside, a warbler hurries through its auctioneering, each repeat hammered by an angry note. Every creature only seeks reprieve from habit, lives and breathes on borrowed money, borrowed song, striking matches against the sun. One aspect I noticed, one subtle change in moving down to St. Louis from here is the change of weather patterns. In St. Louis, you get almost all the weather comes in from the northwest. So particularly in late spring and late summer, you get those afternoon thunderstorms that I can see from my kitchen window. Clouds. What and what and what and what? Reiterate the clouds, igneous in source and crushing weight, 10,000 feet above the earth. Locked and forgotten in states of want, from the kitchen sink we watch them roll against the sun, diurnal, tidal, spume of Puget Sound, eggs boiled at Little Bighorn, evaporated bird baths on display, sunbathers stretched beside the pool, August clouds retentive of a flashing glimpse. We say, that's life, that's love. Yet the active file distinguishes hounds, greyhounds, mongrels, spaniels, curs, gate and mirror, heads of lettuce glazed with rain, Taj Mahal and traveler, marching trees of Burnham wood, sheep from Deuteronomy. Above the kitchen sink, we skim a massive novel shorn of names, wild ramifications of disappointment, old life convoluted past recall. Just to further connect one place with another, summer before last I was driving through Arkansas and stopped in Osage, Arkansas, which I think is where most of the wood that's used for houses in St. Louis was milled. Seemed interesting to me at the time. Outside in. What was this basement door, scratched by the dog, cut from the hardest shagbark stock? In its shade, canebrake stacked up, stock still in a shower of rachis and bark. Ticks crowded summer leaves, triggered to jump by heat. High up, jagged branches made exploded diagrams of cloud. The straightest went for axe halves, turned on a lathe, the trunk for sash and door. From Osage, a freight hauler drove through smoking rain as planks rattled over ruts. I know none of this, only the dark plumes of grain, deep scores, and smooth action of its lock. Edges. I think this is a poem just in 3 short sequences, a sequence of 3 short poems. And I think it's poems of a reluctant traveler. It begins with a sequence of misfortunes that I know to have befallen travelers. Edges. 1. One could fall asleep and float 100 miles off course, or rob a restaurant in broad daylight, or weep openly on the air. Contretemps could snap the line that anchors date and memory, uproot the smell of eucalypts, or debauch a shadow from its leaf. Mockingbirds from Texas range no further north than this chill suburb in which we sit, talking of where to go in spring. 2. Fear derives its force from love. Its own effect, love radiates from where I am to where I'm not. It amplifies, a hooded wave racing through the dark. 3. On bare walls, the daylight rings changes of intensity. Everything is on its way to somewhere else but walls. Across an inland sea of grass, nothing stops the sun but cinder blocks and cottonwood. I wonder where you've been. looking out. A person looking out of a window waits for something that never comes, but wants a flash from the outside world. Through upper reaches of an elm, a face peering down for no good reason looks absurd above the sill, as if a thumb stuck in its mouth. A face at the window wears no expression, blotted white by darkness in the room. This poem takes as its point of departure a poem by Mallarmé of the same title, The Pipe. In Mallarmé's, it's a prose poem. In his poem, he sits down and wants to start to work and is intent on that, and then runs across an old pipe he had, and the smell of it sends him back to when he last smoked it, which was in London, and then the poem continues drifting through memory in London. In this case, it's not my pipe or my work or my memory, but those of another poet. The Pipe. All winter afternoon, I hunted for a lost draft of Caw, Vermilion, Cottonwood. Released, it might have drifted back to Kansas. Along what was the Oregon Trail, snow filled a hoof print, revealing stripes of furrows and temporary boundaries. Sorting through accordion files of recipes, cream bond incised by a selectric, letters of acceptance, pale blue aerograms from England, the detritus of a life bound for special collections. I found a rosewood pipe, its charred bowl and thatched screen, resinous of 4566 18th Street. Inhaling, I forgot my task, transported to your sealed past. Inconclusive strands of fog cascade from Twin Peaks and break apart. A rosy-fingered block of frozen squid, bought at Safeway, thaws in the sink. It smells sweet. Whistling a tune from Harry Parch, you peel off the speckled skin, then pull a white feather from each tiny parachute. Alone, you light the pipe, not thinking of expected guests or cloud chamber music, but of Caw, Vermilion, Cottonwood, and hoofprints filled with snow. There's a mockingbird that lives outside my window and is fiercely protective of the holly bush that it's taken over. And it, as with mockingbirds will, it runs through all different songs, including car alarms in its repertoire. But I was thinking I was associating it with the sort of practice of Roman emperors like Sulla, who take over. Would take over other religions and absorb them into the Roman pantheon. In part, just thinking, what is he doing by singing other birds' songs, which are presumably his enemies? Mockingbird. We live each other's death and die each other's life, borrowing a cold flame from sycamore in early leaf. This morning, after heavy rain, the street erupts with birds. Grackles sharpen swords, and cedar waxwings strip the vines, declaring love and war. With tail cocked, I guard the stoop from strangers ill at ease. As sunlight strikes a wheel, I think as Sulla thought, hostis, host and enemy to every sound that swells my throat. Crows. Crows, it seemed a particularly foolish subject to write poems about. I was warned by Bob Adamson, who's going to be reading here in the spring. He has a poem that begins, all those crow poems are about poets. None of them get inside a crow's head, preen or rustle, let alone fly on crow's wings. No one knows what it is to sing a crow song. So I was warned. Crows. Their caw is not for us, but calls to corvid, canid, ringing out tomorrow's crass and love the dead. Black leaves against the snow, a murder crowns what's left of day. Riled by shadows cast in bronze, they rave and trash and mob the sun. Their wings and bills compacted as initials from the Book of Kells. I don't know if all kids go through this, but there's a time when I was young where I would compulsively trace drawings, which in retrospect seems like an odd activity. I don't know what I was doing, but I would particularly trace from Hawthorne's Wonder Book and Tanglewood Tales. Why? Tracing. When you were young, what buzz of expectation promised nothing known? What thought perplexed as belly down, intensive concentration traced Pegasus from Wonder Book, your pencil finding wings and hooves as fish rise from cloudy beds? When paper slips, the scale is wrong, distorting all. When you were young, without words, you hum the tune. Just a gloss on this next poem. The Scottish ballad Bonnie James Campbell, which came into Appalachian music, then got changed and speeded up and changed into a fiddle tune named called Cumberland Gap. Bonnie James Campbell goes something like, the meadows all have fallen and the sheep is unshorn, the house is a-leaking and the baby's unborn. But Bonnie James Campbell nowhere could be seen, for back come the saddle, but never come he. Thunderheads. Days spent in the shelter of work blow apart at dusk. Skirts rustle mimic rain as shadows bloom across the draw. A 5-ton hammer taps a crimped leaf. Cutter heads dredge voices through the wall. Above the Chattanooga, some latent thought unfolds. Heaped clouds detonate a cauliflower dome. Topographies of doubt read out, lit by leaders, cloud to ground. As the first thick drop clings to thorn, a core of purple cabbage stirs Bonnie James Campbell from Cumberland Gap, pelting river pearls. I don't know if it's still used, but radio telemetry is what was used. I think it still is largely to track wild animals that have collars, monitoring devices on their collars. I once saw someone in a field taking a radio transmitter and just sort of scanning the horizon. Radio telemetry. Under rain, your whip antenna with a solar cell rotates, listening for something winter meant to say. Far north, desperate joy without remorse wakes and tilts across the swale. A slow wave pours away. Sifting bleeps and bearing lines sniff the air. What pertains? In this poem, Bolinas is a little town north of San Francisco where I lived for a while when I was a kid, and Kathleen's my sister. California. On Christmas Day, Kathleen and I propel a raft with plastic spoons through the hissing fur of surf, stirring as we go an Alka-Seltzer sun. We pass Bolinas Stinson School, the firehouse, and Smiley's Dive, extinguished geodesic domes along the Mesa Road where Cream Soroyan lives. With a telescope, my sister spies the erstwhile chemist of Argonne, who left his post to polish glass. As penance, he engraves a glyph of hydrogen on the blank face of every cliff from Monterey to Inverness. Beside us, cormorants describe the chop in grunts, then plunge through 30 feet of grease. I try to hold my breath as long and cheat or fail. As evening comes, we pass the final spit of land, once more around the horn, and then we'll make for home. Packing up. An Irish tea table. Someone took his spoils, no longer speaks, inured to use. Having crawled beneath to disconnect the phone, I constellate wormholes and deal, black stars to guide us through whatever things we fought about, hooded forms of rage and grief. From slipperfoot to sea scroll, traffic of a dead world is testing a technique by which to make intentions clear. You walk, and on the tabletop, a glass of water trembles. This is a translation from Propertius from Poem 7, Book 4, in a loose manner. I know Jim Powell's translated this poem as well. In this poem, Cynthia, the poet's lover, appears after her death to sort of berate Propertius for his failures and infidelities. After Propertius. Ghosts do exist. Death is not entire. A cloud of smoke escapes the funeral pyre. Though lately buried beside the road, Cynthia seemed to lean above my bed when, after jerking off, half in a dream, I found my sheets a chill and lonely realm. She had the selfsame hair, the selfsame eyes. Her shroud was burned into her side. The flames had gnawed her favorite silver band, and the river Leith had chafed her lips with sand. Her breath was warm, but as she spoke, I heard her brittle fingers rattle like a gourd. Traitor, from whom I should expect as much, can sleep already have you in its clutch? Have secrets of Pagao, where evenings end at 4 a.m., already slipped your mind? For you, how many times I shinnied down a gutter pipe or trellis to the ground, embracing on the sidewalk where we met, hugging beneath our coats to find some heat. Think of the secret oaths, each word a lie, the wind is torn apart so heedlessly. As I fell from sight and mind, no one spoke a sympathetic word. No watchman shook a castanet to keep my spirit safe. No pillow couched my head above the earth. In short, who saw you stoop beside my bier, your borrowed gabardine grown damp with tears? If March was a busy time, you might at least have stepped into the road to see me pass. Had you no thought to mingle with my smoke a pinch of sandalwood to bring me luck? Did you never think to gather irises or spill a drop of wine and break the glass? Burn Renee for poisoning my mind with acid gossip as I sipped his wine, and Nikki for perverted appetites kept hidden. Brand them both with cigarettes. Once Mina sold herself, and now she signs the dust with a hymn of gold. And if she finds some waitress rhapsodizing on my grace, she huffs and puffs to have the girl replaced. Because a niece brought lilacs for my tomb, or sister asked a favor in my name, Mina bound the one to a rocking chair and whipped the other, hung by her twisted hair. While you stood by, she melted down my gold relief, a dowry from my dying coals. But I won't hound you for these bitter wrongs, Propertius. In your books my reign was long. I swear by rhymes that cannot be reversed, and engine idle growls of Cerberus. I never strayed, and if I lie, may boas wreathe in hissing knots above my bones. Few living know the river Leith divides, distributaries branching left and right. One channel carries Clytemnestra's taint and the monstrous artificial cow of Crete, through which a woman mated with a bull, its plastic carapace a rocking hull. On the other branch, a riverboat descends, with flags unfurled in honeysuckle winds. An orchestra assembles on the deck, with cymbals, double bass, and clarinet. Andromeda and Hypermestra, wives remembered in the stars, speak of their lives. The first reveals her forearms, badly bruised from frozen chains, an undeserved abuse. The second tells of how her sisters dared to stab their bridegrooms, only hers was spared. And so our loves are ratified by tears, our lives by death. I hid your faults for years. If any feeling penetrates the fog of pot that you and Mina smoke, I beg, support my mom and keep my looking glass untouched by any other woman's glance. Burn the books you seeded with my name and stop amassing poems by my fame. Uproot that English ivy from my grave before it binds my bones with twisted leaves. Where the Seine River forms a horseshoe bend, a dark exactitude through sunlit land. Inscribe an epitaph in native stone that city passengers might glimpse at dawn. Here lie golden Cynthia's remains, reflecting glory on the mighty Seine. A dream that comes through cemetery gates should not be shaken off but given weight. Night frees the cloistered shadows and we roam, then Cerberus himself may stray from home. At dawn, the laws command we rendezvous beside the river Leith, a lifeless slough. For now, let others have you. I alone will keep you, grinding bone entwined with bones. Having closed this argument and case, her shadow fell away from my embrace. Just one more for the road. So thanks for listening. Revenants. Cessation of pulse and breath means gone without moving, or come, an end to coming and going. What's left feeds off memory, bloodless but strong. Sometimes caught out at dawn, a revenant gets talked about across the kitchen counter. You and not, nether and neither, very old and new. Thanks.